How's it going? Hi. Make sure I've got comments turned on. Give everyone a couple minutes to join in this morning before we get things started, just to make sure everyone doesn't miss anything, because we're going to go over a couple important things at the beginning. Hi. Hi, Karen. I'm glad you made it. Hi, Maria. How's everyone doing this morning? How's the weather around the world? Hi, Amber. Long time no see. Hi, Diane. Hi, Jody. Hey, Beth. Oh, it's cold and windy in New York. Nice. You're going to get 78, Lori? Hey, Diane. Ah, Karen, that's right. You're early in the morning. It's supposed to warm up into the 70s here, and the sun is shining. It was very, very windy, so my walk later should be windy. I'll probably wear long sleeves. And Rockford is doing what? Oh, cool, Christina. It's good to see you again. Hi, Karen. Oh, you're in Tampa, Maria, so I'm guessing in Florida it's humid. Hey, Jessica, it's good to see you again. So it looks like we've got a good crowd going. If you would, share the video, please, so we can get as many nail professionals that are interested in getting some liquid and powder basics as possible. Ooh, Eastern Canada. Is it warm there or is it cold there? Let's see, Eastern, you're over by New York, so I'm guessing a little chilly maybe. Hey, Karen. Hi, Belinda. And so just to go over a couple housekeeping things for the liquid and powder. Since it's quarantine, some of you may be practicing this at home. So just a couple things to take into consideration since you're practicing at home would be to think about your tabletops. Normally we would be practicing these things at the salon and we wouldn't have to worry about it because our salon table is designed for the things that we're practicing with. So if you're going to be practicing with me today, hey Andrea, if you're going to be practicing with me today, then you need to think about the surface that hey Scott, hey Linda. If you're going to be practicing with me today, I want you to think about the surface that you're going to be practicing on and protect your surface, because we definitely don't want to ruin our kitchen table or our TV trays or, our bedroom dresser or whatever surface we decided to, hey Sabrina, or whatever surface we decided to practice on today. A couple of options that you may have, if you've taken the C&D Artrageous class and you have the art mat, that's a silicone surface, so you could put it under your table towel to practice on. BFF Mel! Mwah! If you have a silicone mat for cooking in the kitchen, you could also use that to put under your table towel and just run it through your dishwasher afterwards, and then you'll clean it up just fine. You could go outside and practice realistically. Just take into consideration the temperature is going to affect your mix ratio as well as the wind, so you might want to set up some sort of wind block. Also, kind of think about some sort of like something you could put down, like maybe a trash bag. You could put some like stacks of newspaper inside of a trash bag and then practice on top of that, but somehow protect your work surface, because we don't want to damage our work surface if any of our liquid should get on it. And remember, you're going to be wiping your brush out on a towel. And so whether that is a paper towel, or I've just cut up my soft landing sheets into little strips, and I'm going to fold one of my little strips in half. And so wiping my brush on this, that is going to bleed through. It's not plastic backed. So my brush is going to bleed through that. And so I'm using a silicone mat as backing. And so you just want to make sure you're protecting your work surface if you are practicing at home. So just a quick, since we are doing this during quarantine, make sure if you're practicing at home that you're protecting your work surface. In case you had not thought of that, just a quick little tip, because I don't want any of you to come back and be like, oh no, guess what I ruined during quarantine when I was practicing nails, because that would be sad. So what you're gonna need if you're gonna play along today is just some liquid, some tips to practice on, some files if you want to practice finish filing, something plastic that you can drop some mixed ratio beads on, a brush so that you can pick up your liquid and powder, and some powder. We're really just going to go through the basics. We'll talk about some brush care. We'll talk about creating your mixed ratio with your liquid and powder, and go over the basics of sculpting a one color nail. And it looks like the dog has decided to lay on my stand. So even though I bought this fancy schmancy stand that won't move when I'm bumping my table, since I'm shooting a live at home during quarantine, when the dog lays on it, it's gonna move. So in the future, when I'm doing fancy schmancy things from like the salon or the hotel, the stand won't move. But since we're at quarantine, things are gonna be a little funky. So let's switch over and go under camera and get started on doing cool nail things. What do you say? And I'm going to try to keep up with comments while I'm doing the nails. However, if I do miss any of your comments, I do promise to come back and read them at the end of the live and catch back up with you. And then sometimes, just in case none of you have ever done a Facebook Live, sometimes Facebook doesn't show all of the comments during the live. So if I do miss your comment during the live, I will catch it afterwards. And if for some reason Facebook chooses not to show your comment at all, which occasionally happens, don't hesitate to reach out to me after the live via private message. I would never intentionally ignore a comment. So don't hesitate to reach out with your questions privately as well. Okay, let's flip around and let's do some liquid and powder. Hey, Herman. All right. Let's go to the nail table. We're going to bring the stand in a little closer. Now I have to move the dog. She's not going to be happy with me. Alrighty. Let's talk about brush care before we talk about much else, because it's going to be really important that you understand how to take care of your brush. And let's say you just got a brand new brush. It has just arrived. You are so excited. What you want to keep in mind is that your brush is going to make you money. It is going to be your very best friend. So you want to remove the little plastic protective cap that came to you on your brush, and you want to throw that little plastic cap away, because if you keep that little plastic cap and try to shove it back on your brush, it could melt to your brush. And if that little plastic cap melts to our brush, what that means is we could now have a brush with a little plastic cap melted to it. And how are we going to do nails with a little plastic cap melted to our brush? Anyone? Bueller, anyone? We're probably not going to do nails with a little plastic cap melted to our brush. So what you want to do is throw that plastic cap away, then take your brush, and you'll notice it's nice and stiff. It's not really moving. It's keeping its form. It has some packing material in it that helps hold that form. So press it into something lint-free, And use your fingers behind that something glint-free to break that up. We're just releasing all that packing material. I don't know if I can get close enough that you can see the little dandruffs or not. But it kind of looks like little tiny dandruffs. See if I can get the light in there just right. And they're pretty hard to see under camera. They're super, super tiny. Once you feel like you've got the vast majority of the little tiny dandruffs worked out of there, flip your fabric around that you're using, whatever it is, whether it's a table towel, etc. Because we don't want to wipe our brush back into the packing material. Push your brush into some fresh, clean liquid. Completely submerge it. You do not want to put your brush into the liquid until you have as much of the packing material out of it. Has anyone ever bought a brand new brush and put it in liquid and then you seem to have some stiffness in your brush that you can never get out of it? That happens when you put your brush into liquid and it still has packing material out in it. And the packing material and the liquid dry in your brush and creates a little hardness that you can't seem to ever get back out. So we're just dipping the brush in the liquid and kind of gently wiggling it across whatever we're wiping that on. I'm just using a little cut up piece of soft landing. You can use a little piece of gauze if you've got some paper towel at home. We're kind of improvising for quarantine. You really just want to make sure that your brush is nice and clean. Then once you're sure it's clean, you don't see any more little dandruffs, you want to train it into the shape that you want it to keep, and it's ready to store. You want to store your liquid and powder brush flat and covered at all times. So that's pretty much brush care. Depending, whoa. I just lost electricity, so this could make the Facebook Live entertaining. If we can bear with me, I will do what I can. I apologize for the lighting. I have no electricity. So I will do my best to make sure that you see as good as you can with no lighting. Yes, I agree, Karen. Soft landings are fantastic. So brush care for your brush is going to be keeping it stored flat and covered, cleaning it with monomer. If the manufacturer that makes your brush suggests you clean it with something beyond monomer, that is specific to your brush. So always follow the directions for the brush that you have and don't mix it up with other brushes. Kind of keep that in mind because different manufacturers make their brushes differently. And you want to follow the directions for the brush that you have. The brushes should be used with liquid and with powder, and most of them are only going to be cleaned with monomer. Some of them may come with a special brush cleaner, but that's going to be very specific to specific manufacturers. Otherwise, anything else should not touch your brush. They shouldn't come into contact with oils or shampoo and conditioner or any of those fun things. And one thing that your brush should absolutely never ever come into contact with is skin. No skin. So you shouldn't be bringing it to a nice fine point with your fingers. You shouldn't be licking it to a nice fine point. You shouldn't be bringing it to a fine point on your wrist or any other weird, funny little tricks. Karen, your question is, should we not clean it with other things because of the glue? The reason we don't clean it with other things is because it actually contaminates the brush itself, We're using a liquid and a powder to create the mix ratio, which creates the enhancement. And those two products polymerate to create that enhancement. So if we introduce other products onto the brush, those other products can get into the enhancement and cause surface breakdown. So that's why we reduce anything that would touch our brush. So again, for those of you just joining, I just lost electricity, so I apologize for the lighting. Let me see if the flash will come on my cell phone. Ooh, I think that's worse than no lighting, so we'll just turn that back off. Do you have any questions about brush care before we pop into mix ratio? And I'm going to clean this up because I know there's a little bit of delay on live. We're going to clean out the Dappen dish. Oh, great, Jessica. Sometimes, how do you clean out the brush if there's a little bit of powder stuck in it? One thing that you can do is, there are some deeper Dappen dishes. Let me grab one out of my drawer. There's some deeper styles of Dappen dishes. And what you can do is take a little bit of poster tack, and let me grab a little piece of it in case someone doesn't know what that is. It's like, some countries it's blue, some countries it's white. It's this little gooey stuff that you can buy. And it's poster putty or poster tack or blue tack, or it's called different things in different countries. But it's sticky. You can like stick it with things. And you can take and put it on your brush and poster tack your brush to the wall so that it dangles down the wall, and put monomer in your Dappen dish so that your brush hangs in the Dappen dish from the wall with monomer in there, and let it hang by the poster tack into the Dappen dish by the monomer, and soak in the monomer until you can very gently loosen what's in the brush with an orange wood stick. And you would just very, very gently, let me grab an orange wood stick out of the drawer. Take an orange wood stick and lay your brush down and just gently, kind of the best you could, fan it out. And slide the orange wood stick down the hairs extremely, extremely gently. And if it tugged, that would be an indication that you needed to let it rest in the monomer longer. Otherwise, it would slide the monomer off if it would slide the powder off if it had rested in the monomer long enough. That's a really easy way and a safe way for your brush to get the powder off the brush that has gotten stuck in there. And getting product stuck in the brush frequently is a really good indicator that it's time to practice the mix ratio. And for those of you that are beginners and you really need to see this, I wouldn't necessarily submerge it overnight. I would kind of hang out and like check on it every 10-15 minutes or so. And the only time I would suggest doing it overnight is if you were maybe in a really big hurry, or sometimes I've seen it necessary with students, and they were in a really big hurry and they put their brush away after a client and they have a really huge chunk of powder in there. For those of you that are really, really beginners with this and you need to see the mix ratio with really, really good lighting, I do have a mix ratio video on my YouTube page. So if you need to catch this with really good lighting and you don't just need like this basics brush up that we're going through right now for the live, you can catch a video on my YouTube. I'm going to come in and just grab some liquid into my Dappen dish right quick so that we can cover mixed ratio before we get into one color application. And if the electricity decides not to come back on, I'll redo this live next week. You guys are getting to experience country living. It's a good thing I have my phone charged. What are my thoughts on molding the brush flat or round for use? That's going to be personal preference, and it's going to depend on what you're doing. The reason that I keep this brush shaped at a point is because it makes it easier to get nice, crisp points in a smile line. This is a number 10. And the number 10 is the easiest one to shape to a point for those corners on the smile line. And if you want to keep it shaped more to a round or a square, that's really helpful if you do more one color nails, because it's easier to work back in zone 3. And so let's say that I'm about to work in zone 3, I'm probably going to shape my brush to that round versus bringing it to the point. And you'll find that for storing it, I'm going to store it at the point so that it's easy for me to get it into that shape when I want to do my smile line corners. When I'm actually working with it to do the nails, you'll find that I bring it out to that round shape because it's easier to pick up a bead and it's easier to work with it for going back into zone 3 and for feathering all the different zones. One of my favorite ways to teach mixed ratio is very OCD friendly. How many of you have OCD? Or at least OCD tendencies when it comes to doing nails? Using some simple 3 counts can really make it easier to start to determine your mixed ratio, because it becomes easier to start to adjust at your liquid and your powder when you have some consistencies. BFF Mel, you live and breathe and bleed OCD. What I would like you to try is always keep your brush in your liquid for 3 seconds. Always keep your brush in your powder for 3 seconds. And always keep your bead on your brush for 3 seconds. Don't vary those 3 things. And you'll find that your mixed ratio becomes much, much more consistent because you have those 3 things always exactly the same. Something I want you to kind of watch, if we can kind of zoom in on the liquid for just a second. I want you to watch the brush. I've dried it out as much as I can. I want you to watch the brush as I stick it in the liquid. Are you ready? And I'm going to wait for the live to catch up because I know there's a lag. So is everyone staring intently at the brush because he's going to perform a little trick. Are you ready? Here we go. Did you see it? When the brush soaked up the liquid, he got a little fatter. And so if we always give that brush 3 seconds to soak up the liquid, he always soaks up the exact same amount of liquid every single time. What difference does that make? Well, let's zoom back out so we can see what's going on. The difference that makes is if we're always picking up the same amount of liquid, 1, 2, 3, then we can vary how we wipe on the side. If I'm always here, 1, 2, 3, if I wipe this much, it makes a difference than if I wipe this much. Whereas if I just flick the brush like this, wiping it this much this time and this much next time could give me different amounts of liquid in my brush. So try to always put your brush so that it's in up to halfway and give it 3 seconds in the liquid. Then how much you wipe it will actually be controlled because it has the same amount of liquid. So if you need to wipe it this much or if you need to wipe it this much will actually make a difference because it has the same amount of liquid. So let's actually grab the liquid and then let's go for some powder. I'm going to bring this over under the camera and let's go in the powder for the 3 seconds. 1, 2, 3. Whoops, he stayed in there. So what could that mean? That can happen from several different things. There may not have been enough liquid in the brush. Maybe I didn't put enough effort into my brush. Maybe it's just bad luck. Let's talk about a couple things in the powder without trying to pick up a bead. One of the things is you want to have your powder surface flat because you want to see how far you're traveling. You don't need to go any further than the flags. Let me kick the flash on for just a second. See how the bottom of my brush is just a little bit darker? You don't need to go any deeper than your flags. And I kick that back off because if I leave that on, it will drain my battery faster. And since I have no electricity, I can't charge the battery. So you don't need to go any deeper in the powder than your flags. So place that in, travel a little ways forward for the 3 seconds, and bring it out. So place it in, a little ways forward for the 3 seconds, and bring it out. Sometimes you're going to drop it. Sometimes you have too much liquid on your brush. Sometimes you don't have enough liquid in your brush. It's going to vary. If you travel too far, you're going to get way too much. If you scoop like this, you're probably going to have it really, really dry. So kind of keep in mind, you don't usually have to travel very far, and you may need to come up at a slight angle versus trying to bring it straight out. Because sometimes if we try to bring it straight out, that's when we drop it. So you may need to kind of give it a slight pickup so that you don't drop it. And some manufacturers may have a little bit different pickup method. So don't always dismiss the different tips and tricks. Now I'm gonna, hey Michelle. Oh, please don't let me butcher your name. Is it Trenke? Hello, I'm so sorry if I said it wrong. So let's go 3 seconds and 3 seconds and see where that gets us. 1, 2, 3. Wipe it off. 1, 2, 3. Now let's look at it. 1, 2, 3. All of the liquid absorbed all of the powder before we could get to 3. And would you look at that? It fell off. What do you think it means when all of the liquid absorbs all of the powder before we can get to that 3 count? Now on this one, at the 3 count, the powder just finished absorbing into the liquid. So we're going to place it down. Yes, Jessica. When all of the liquid absorbs all of the powder before we can get that to that 3 count, it's too wet. When all of the liquid completely absorbs all of the powder right at that 3 count, that's the mix ratio that we're looking for. Now, what if we do our 3 seconds? And it kind of looks like we have some powdered sugar. Let's kick the light on for just a second. Can you see that powdered sugar on there? What does that mean? Let's make it more obvious. So if it looks like our bead has a little bit of powdered sugar going on, what could that possibly mean? Yes, when the bead has some powdered sugar look going on, it's way too dry. So really take the time to give your bead that 3 seconds to hang out on your brush, because those 3 seconds are going to give you an indicator of what's going on the bead. Now let's say that we're not giving it the 3 seconds to hang out on the brush. Let's see what could happen. So I'm not going to give it the 3 seconds. I'm just going to plop it right onto the nail. And I'm going to try to work with it. Oh, look what's happening to the product with my brush. Look at all those goobers. What's going to happen to my brush? See it? So what is that going to mean for the nail and for my brush? It's going to be a difficult application, exactly. And I'm going to be frantically back here trying to clean out my brush to make sure that I don't have a really hard lump drying in my brush. Yes, it will clump my brush if the brush is not cleaned properly and cleaned quickly. And a lot of times, yes, Jessica, we'll have to use the trick we talked about earlier to clean out our brush. A lot of times we don't notice that our brush is getting clumped up when we're doing that because we're working with the nail and it's like, oh, what is wrong with this stupid nail? And we're trying to work really quickly because the liquid and powder is going to get hard on us. And so we don't notice what's going on until it's too late. We go to work on the next nail and the next thing we know, there's this big hard clump in our brush and it's making these gouges in the next nail and it's super frustrating. For those of you just joining us, I apologize for the lighting. I just lost electricity, so we are doing the best we can with what we have. Let's move into application. We'll move these guys around to the side so you can still see. Even though I've been doing nails for 21 years, I still 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, and 1, 2, 3. 3 in the liquid, 3 in the powder, and 3 on my brush. Thoughts? What are my thoughts on the perfect mix ratio if it's good when it looks like an orange peel? Yes, I'm actually using C&D Perfect Color powders. When they are a good mix ratio, it does look like an orange peel. Let me pick one up and show you. And if you're using the Retention Plus powders, they do very much look like a frosted mug that you just pulled out of the freezer. So if I can get that to focus. Get the light on and see if it will focus. Can you kind of see that orange peel texture in it, or will it not focus? Let me see if. Now it's been hanging out on there too long. It's getting shiny. Grab another one. So can you see that orange peel texture to it? It's pitted yet smooth. It literally looks like the surface of an orange. And that's pretty consistent for a lot of brands. Pretty much mixed ratio is a very universal concept. It's a medium wet consistency. That's science more so than a manufacturer difference. So let's play around a little bit, just hanging out on some tips. So if you guys have some tips at home that you can play with. Question, do I wipe with one side of my brush or both? When I'm cleaning out my brush after working on the nail, I will actually wipe out both sides of my brush just to be sure that I get any remaining product that could be lingering in my brush. I don't want to take any chances that something could be gumming up my brush. And actually something that I do, let me get a little bit of liquid in it so that you can see. Something that I do when I'm wiping out my brush, I wipe it on both sides and then I give it a little bit of a squiggle on both sides and then I wipe it one more time. Just to make sure, because that little bit of a squiggle that I give it kind of spreads it out a little, and when it spreads it out a little bit, that would show me if I had any pieces of powder left in there that were starting to harden, and then I smooth it back into the shape that I'm going to use to pick up my powder. Let's start talking about how we would apply the product in zones onto the nail. There are a couple of things that are going to be important with this, and they pertain to your brush angle. One of the things I really want you to pay attention to is with your brush angle, when you apply out here at the edge, think about how that finished nail should look. You want it to taper down off the tip, so your brush should angle the way you want that finished nail to look. When you're working on the arch, the brush should angle the way you want that arch to be, so your brush angle is going to come up. When you're working in zone 3, you want that little zone 3 to taper back, so you're going to have your brush angled up and tapered back. Oh, thanks for fixing that, Heather. I'm so flustered because the electricity is out. So Heather is correcting my, from the opaque powders are the ones that have the orange peel, and the frosted glass is on the Perfect Color and the Retention Plus powders. So bring your brush up in zone 3 to get that nice smooth transition back at zone 3. So basically kind of think of your brush angle as creating the finished nail. You want to angle the brush the way you want the product to lay when the nail is finished. Hey Heather, thank you so much for that. Also, when you're working with the nail at the angle facing the client, your brush is going to turn from side to side the way you want the finished nail to be. So when we're working with the product going into the sides, we're also going to turn the brush to go into the sides because we want to taper over into those sides. We don't want to leave it flat like this, because if we left the brush flat like this, not only would the product be thick on the sides, what else is our brush going to do? What's over here? Do, do, do. Do, 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 do. What am I smacking? What's getting all over the skin? Exactly. So we've got overexposure if we don't turn that brush. By turning the brush, we not only angle the product and reduce our finish file time, we also reduce the chances that we're getting product on the skin and getting the skin on our brush. We don't want the skin to contaminate the brush. So the first few beads that I pick up, I'm not going to worry about if I'm actually sculpting a nail. I'm just going to show you sculpting the brush angles. So we're going to do our 3 seconds, wipe it off, do our 3 seconds, do our 3 seconds, and there, would you look at that? It's frosted glass. No wonder I couldn't make it look like an orange peel. It's really frustrating to have no electricity live. It's flustering. And I'm glad it now looks like frosted glass. We're going to set that down. And when you have your brush at the angle you want the finished nail to be, notice that it creates that little wedge shape out here. See how it already tapers that product so that we don't have as much finish filing to do. Now, if we're actually going to do a one color, we would go ahead and come up and taper this a little bit or feather it into the next zone. But we're not going to smush it, we're just going to feather it because we want to keep that angle going up towards the arch. So just angle that brush when you work with the product and gently smooth. So you see the difference it's going to make to angle your brush? And how much less filing is that going to be just by changing the angle of your brush? Those of you that are actually doing liquid and powder basics right now, or if you're in school right now, this will make your life so much easier. One of the things in school that made my sets take so much longer is I was humping product on, they look like little hunchbacks of Notre Dame, and then I was filing for 200 years to get all that excess product off. So angle your brush back so that you're putting the product on as if it were finished product, and then you also don't have to file it because it already looks like finished product. Let's grab some more product. This is going to be the largest bead that we work with, and that one was too dry. We give it 3 seconds and we've got our frosted glass. We're going to set this down in zone 2, and remember our brush angle changes. Here we want to leave that product a little higher, and we want to roll that brush when we come to the side. And notice when I just gently press it and just slightly pull. See how barely I'm pulling it when I press it? And it's blending into that because I feathered that first one. And then blend it. And we're just going to bring that brush up lightly at the back to taper the back of that so that it will blend into the next section of product. We'll smooth it out so that it will all come together. So see how just using those brush angles, right? It is exactly like doing a client. If we had a client and the power went out, we would totally have to keep going on their nails, whether there was electricity or not. And I can't see where my battery is at. So if my battery dies, I apologize because I have no way to charge my phone. And I will redo the live next week if that happens. We're going to go in and grab this final section of product. It's going to be our smallest. That one was too big. The trick with this one is not to put it in that back zone. We're going to put it on top of the zone in front of it. Then angle your brush up and put your brush a little bit in front of the product. See how my brush is in front of the product? It's not behind it like it normally would be. We're going to turn that brush, and you've got to work pretty quickly because we're thinning that product way down, so it's going to dry really quickly. But we've got that brush angled up to get that finish. And then we're going to smooth it out. And see how even that bit of product contributed to the arch. So your brush angles all contributed to the finished shape of your product. And all of those angles, having your brush at the angle that you want your finished nail to be, makes for less filing. Trisha, for how far I'm dipping my brush into the liquid, every time I go in, I'm usually dipping it about half and holding it for 3 seconds so that I always have exactly the same amount of liquid in my brush every single time. Oh, Holly, I'm so glad you picked up a trick. So as I said, I wasn't doing, see how crappy this one looks over here? I wasn't doing this one to actually do a nail. I wanted you to get this for the brush angles. So let's actually do one from the front angle so that you can see what it looks like doing it as if you were doing it on a client. Let's go in for 3 seconds. And 3 seconds. And for those of you that maybe missed the beginning, I will save this even though the electricity went out. That one was too small to be a zone 1 bead. Because there is still some information that you might find helpful. Let's just go ahead and refresh the liquid. When you're practicing, it can be frustrating to get the right mix ratio when your liquid gets way down too low. So try to make sure when you're practicing that you keep your liquid at the optimum level. Because there's no sense in getting frustrated when you're practicing. And then when you get the hang of it, you can get used to getting your mixed ratio beads as you go down. Oh, good. I'm glad you guys can still see pretty good. Thanks for letting me know, Karen. So we're going in 1, 2, 3. We're going over here. 1, 2, 3. We're going to check him out. 1, 2. Oh, he absorbed a little too quick, so we're just going to snag a little more powder. 2, 3. Looks like he's good to go. So we would place it, use your balance point positioning. Let it hang out there for a second. Angle your brush back. And you're going to have to work pretty quickly. Remember to turn the brush when you go to those sides. And then feather it back just a little bit, only at the back. Don't smush the wedge. So if we look at that from the side, we still have our wedge. Now I've got just a little bit of bulge here and here, so that means I didn't turn my brush strong enough. So I'm just gonna turn my brush a little stronger and press, because I don't want to be filing there for 200 years. Don't be afraid when you turn your brush to the side to actually press from the side. I would much rather file just a little bit because I came in and pressed from the side and I have a little bit of a press mark than to file because I have a big bulge of product. So if you find that you didn't press enough from the side and you still have a little bit of extra product because you pressed too hard in the center, don't be afraid to come back in and press a little bit from the side. Because if you have a good mix ratio, you actually have 2 or 3 minutes of time to work with the product. And so see, we've got that wedge starting up into our arch. Clean your brush out really, really well. We're going in for 3. And I'm going to go ahead and pull these off just a little bit so I can pull this over so the camera will hopefully focus on the nail instead of the products. I'll still kind of have them in the side so you can see the pickup. Turn this so it'll stop trying to focus on the barcode. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 2, 3. And place it. And then press. And just rolling the brush to the side and gently pulling and pressing at the same time. And then I'm just really gently going to feather that back. And then use it in a gentle touch, smooth. And see how now we're creating our arch from those brush angles. Then that zone 3 or that bead at the back. It's going to be smaller. Make sure he looks like frosted glass. Remember, place him in the product in front. Then bring your brush up. Keep your brush in front of the product as you push it back and work really quickly. Turn your brush to the sides to work it into the sides. And then pull everything to smooth. Smooth gently so you don't create streaks. And those are all your brush angles. Let's see how that looks to do that on a finger. So here's our trusty finger from gel class. Now things are gonna feel a little more complicated because we've got to keep our brush off the skin. We're going 3 seconds in that liquid, 3 seconds in the powder, that's a little dry, 3 seconds in the liquid, 3 seconds in the powder, there we go. Now we've got that frosted glass. And then place it. We're going to angle our brush back. Turn the brush so that we get those sides. Turn for the sides. Taper just a little bit at the back so it feathers into the next zone. And gently smooth it. Make sure my sides are still good. We're going to look at that from the side, see how it's starting up towards the arch. And it's got that little bit feathered. Holly, the counting to 3 really does help you save time because having the right mix ratio gives you longer to work with the product so you make less mistakes. It also makes sure when you have the right mix ratio, you have less service breakdown, which means that you don't do as many nail repairs, you don't have as much lifting, and everything just goes your way so much more often. Give it the 3, and everything absorbed the way it's supposed to. And that bead's a little bit too small, so we're gonna grab a second one. Give him the 3 seconds. I'm gonna place this guy. Press. Really turn that brush into your sides because we want to get those tapered nice and smooth so we don't have to do a lot of filing in the sides. Why wouldn't we want to have to do much filing on those sides? Exactly. It's so easy to catch skin when you file on the sides, so the less filing we have to do on the sides, the better. See how we're creating our arch in our application? It also saves time not to have to file on the sides. You're exactly right. And do you remember what the trick is with our last little guy that we're gonna place in the back? trick is not to place it by the skin so that you have room to taper it. Lift your brush up and keep your brush ahead of the product so you don't have a ledge, and to work quickly. And this can also fill in any little pieces that you may have had left on the sides where you missed a spot, or any little dips in the surface that you may have missed. And it looks like I got that bead a little too thick, so I've got a little bump out here. So I'm going to see if he will mush. If not, I may have a little bit of filing to do there. So that's another precautionary to not get that bead too thick, because then you end up with a little extra product that you drag forward because you got that bead too big. A question: is it necessary to change the liquid in the Dappen dish if it gets cloudy? When your liquid in your Dappen dish gets cloudy, it can affect the clarity of your application. So when this hardens and you finish file it, then your nail can actually be cloudy. So if you're not just practicing, if you're practicing, it doesn't matter. But if you're applying on a client, then the enhancement itself can be cloudy if the liquid in your Dappen dish is cloudy. So that can be your personal preference. But if it's a paying client, I would suggest changing it. So precautionary, if you get this little bead back here too thick, this is what's going to happen. You're going to end up with a little thick spot that you have to file off. So we want to make sure that we're not getting this little bead back here too thick. And it looks like the lights came back on. Yay, just in time for finish filing. We're going to let that hang out just a second while we put lids on products. We do not want anything to get dust in it. So you need to put a lid on your Dappen dish. I do not throw out my liquid until after I finish file, just in case one of the nails needs something touched up. So I just put a little lid on it. If your Dappen dish doesn't have a lid, sometimes a 50-cent piece or a quarter or something of that nature might fit over the top. So just kind of see what you have available to you. Your brush needs to go in a brush case or something similar that can protect it. It needs to be flat and covered. The reason that it needs to be flat is because your liquid can go back up into the ferrule, this silver piece, and collect in there, and old liquid can collect dust and debris and come back down into the brush and contaminate the next nail that you do. You also want to throw away what you were wiping on, because that's going to collect dust from the filing. If you have to touch up anything on the nail, you'll need something new and clean to wipe on. It's important that you use a 180 grit surface to wipe on a freshly done liquid and powder nail, because if you're using anything lower than a 180 grit surface, you can actually potentially scratch the surface enough that it can lead to micro cracks. So it's important that you're using something lower, or something higher, something higher than a 180 grit surface. So I'm actually going to use a Blizzard from C&D. I just like that these are white and that it's a refined 180. I'm going to bring this up just a little bit higher so that you can see how I'm filing. Let's check if the nail is hard. Yep, he clicks, so he's ready to file. And let's put a little bit of Sharpie on this so that you can see where my file goes. One of the first tricks to your filing is going to be making sure that your sides are nice and smooth. It's important to leave the sidewalls in place, so don't cut out the sidewalls. However, you do want to bring the sides in if they've gotten bulky. So we would protect the skin, and it's going to be a little tricky because I've got to like hold the finger and hold the tip in the finger. If this were a person in the salon, I would protect their skin with my skin like this. So can you see, let me wrap my skin in here so you can see it against my skin. Can you see how this bulges just a little bit? So I would lay the file in there and file straight. Actually, if I wrap the file around there, is it easier to see that bulge? I would file straight into that bulge without hitting the skin. And then I have just a little smidge of overhang of product. So I can hit just that overhang of product. And since this isn't a real person, I'm going to turn it this way so you can see what I'm doing. I would very carefully hit only the overhang of product and turn my file to smooth it to the sidewall. So I'm hitting only the overhang and smoothing it to the sidewall. Hit only the overhang and smooth it to the sidewall. You want to make sure you've taken all the edges off your files before you do something like that so that you don't cut the skin. It catches that overhang while also eliminating that bulk and the look that it creates, as well as leaving your sidewall intact, because it's extremely important that you leave that sidewall intact and don't start your shaping until the tip of the finger. Here we have a little bit of product that just came out kind of onto the skin. So you would very gently kind of slide your file in and gently loosen it from the skin. And as gently as you can, slide down so that you can clean up that product. Because when you're a beginner and you're doing all these basics, these are mistakes that you're going to make. And it's nothing to be ashamed of or be freaked out about. It's part of learning. The important thing to do when you've done that is to make sure that you're protecting that skin and you've taken the corners off these files. You can do that with another file, just simply going along like this and taking those corners off. And then just really gently laying it in there and very carefully cleaning that side up. Then put your skin on the line, protect their skin with your skin, and clean up those sidewalls. And see the difference that made in the nail just to clean up the sidewalls. When you're done, clean up the shape. Once your sidewalls in shape, aka your front form, are finished, it's time to go ahead and start doing your finish filing. Let's start off going counterclockwise in a curved motion. So I'm literally going to be curving over this side, and I'm only going to be stroking it in one direction. So my file is going to hit 1/3 of this nail this way. It's gonna go just like that. It's gonna wrap around that 1/3 in a curved stroke. And the reason I'm gonna go in this order is because once you get the hang of going in this order, you'll find that your finished filing becomes much faster and more efficient, as well as more consistent. And once you get experienced at doing nails, you'll find that you're less likely to file off your arch. Because if you've had a little bit of practice, if you're in school, you've probably filed off a few of your arches by now, and it's really frustrating. After we do that counterclockwise third, let's go on the opposite, which shockingly is clockwise, and file that clockwise third. Now 2/3 of our nail are finished, and if we look down the barrel, we should start to see 2/3 of it are starting to look pretty good. Now remember, I had that little bit of extra product here. This is where I'm going to start tapering towards that zone 1 with the file. I also have that little extra product, and you can see that my Sharpie is sticking in there. So it's letting me know I've got a little bit of extra filing to do. So something I can do is go ahead and go back and forth to remove some of that bulk. Check on it because I don't want to remove too much. Nope, still there. And anytime as a student or as a beginner that you have to do some extra filing, it's a great reminder, whew, this is why I should be sculpting with my brush. Oh man, this is so why I should be sculpting with my brush. And just keep reminding yourself that. This is why I should be sculpting with my brush. I sure wish I wouldn't have picked up that bead that was too big. I shouldn't have been talking so much to my client that I didn't pay attention to the bead. Maybe some focus would be helpful. So we're getting there, but we still have a little bit of filing to do. And you'll find even when you've been doing nails for a while, you'll still occasionally make mistakes and have to remind yourself, oh yeah, it's a good idea to pay attention and to practice and all these fun things. But as a beginner, as you make these mistakes, don't feel bad. It's part of learning. So once we get that down more to where we want it, then we can come back to our tapering stroke and start tapering that nail down the way that we want it. Then we're going to work back in here, and you want to make sure that you're going in one direction to one side and in one direction to the other side, because you're less likely to cut that skin around those edges if you're not going back and forth. And notice that we're leaving that arch for last. By leaving the arch for last, you make it less likely that you accidentally file him off. Because it's super frustrating to work really hard to get a great arch in your nail and then file it off. So we're going to leave that arch for last. And sometimes I will even, when I'm learning and practicing, turn my practice nail sideways so that I can watch myself file the arch and not file it off. Then when you start to file that arch on clients, you learn to have a nice gentle touch. And what that softer stroke feels like. So that you're less likely to file that arch off on your clients. Sarah, I will make sure that it's saved so that you can definitely go back and watch from the beginning. Now he's still a little bulkier than I would like him to be, so I'm gonna do a little more filing, and that's part of being a beginner. Sometimes you get to do a little more filing. So what you can do is really gently come back in with your strokes that you have. And just keep debulking in those strokes, because we don't want to lose our shape. And practicing your filing strokes to debulk, especially when you're just practicing on practice hands or tips, will help you get faster at the finished filing strokes and get used to them, while also getting your finish down. There he is. Much better. Then when you're happy with it, you can do a couple of things. You can come in and buff that to a shine by hand, or you can apply like your gel finish with your gel system, or you can apply your gel polish. Whatever finish that you prefer in the salon is going to be completely up to you. You just need to cleanse that with your nail cleanser that you would normally use before your next step. Do you have any questions before we crash out of our live? Thank you for adventuring with me through this live today. Who knew that this was going to be such an adventure? Oh my goodness. This was a crazy live. This was seriously an adventure today. I had no idea it was going to be such an adventure. Let me scroll up through while you guys are thinking of questions to make sure I didn't miss anything. Yes, I will save this. And yeah, sticking with the same filing routine definitely ensures consistency from nail to nail. You'll notice a huge difference in your Photos, I strongly encourage you, even if you're a beginner, still take photos of your work, even if you're not happy with it. Having those photos gives you the ability to compare your work, and so that you can see your improvement as you go. You don't have to show them to people just because you took pictures. It doesn't mean someone else has to see it. It just gives you the ability to compare and to kind of evaluate where you need improvement, so you know what you need to work on. And let's go back. I think I caught all the questions as we were going. If there are any questions that I missed and they didn't show up for some reason, please let me know. Go ahead and retype them in right now. Thoughts on dragging a brush across the powder versus letting the brush sit still. You can let it sit. The trick about just letting it sit still is it makes it difficult for the powder to attach to the brush. You have to drag it just a teeny weeny smidge at least in order for it to attach. If you just dip the brush in and let it sit, a lot of the problem with that is then the powder attaches to it all the way around versus getting on one side. And so if you drag it just a little bit, you have that little bead of product on one side, and that allows you then to take that little bead of product and place it on the nail versus having that little bead of product around the brush. And when you have that little bead of product around the brush, a lot of times people will wipe that off or roll that off, and now we have a little bubble in the center of that bead of product, and a lot of times that little bubble in the center doesn't get smashed out, and that can later lead to a crack in the nail. Does that answer your question? Yeah, pictures really are a great reference for yourself, because you can blow those pictures up and see little details and things that you need to work on that you can't see with your naked eye. I do that a lot even with my natural nail photos, to see things that I need to work on in my artwork or in my polishing. And it's really helped me with my polishing game, especially since the 5-point polishing method came out. Then it's helped me perfect a lot in my margins that I've always wanted to work on, but just not been able to get those nice tight margins that I wanted without being able to worry about having to clean up off the skin and clean up off the skin. So photos really can help you perfect your technique without having to show them to anyone. It is good to go back to basics sometimes, just to kind of, sometimes you can pick up tricks. I like watching demos from other educators and other brands just because technique is universal, and sometimes you can pick up tricks and tips that help save you time in the salon, or pick up things that you just didn't think of it from that perspective, and it helps make you a better educator, or it helps make you a better nail professional because it adds to your skill set. So it's definitely never hurts to learn things. Oh, good, Jessica, I'm glad that answered your question. Any other questions for anyone? Yeah, technique really is universal for so many things. And for those of you that need to go beyond the basics, if you're ready to work on smile lines and all of that fun stuff, the next live is at 1 p.m. I'm not sure what time it is. I don't think my clock will show. Yeah, my clock won't show me. So at 1 p.m. Central, I'm going beyond the basics, and we'll do smile lines and such. I'll give it just a couple more seconds because I know there's a delay in case there's any more questions, and then I will sign off so I can sneak lunch in before the next live. It's quarantine. We get lunch, you guys. Yay! Oh, great. I'll see you at lunch. Oh, I'll see you at 1. Woohoo! Thank you so much for joining me. I appreciate your time this morning. I hope everyone had fun. It was awesome learning with you. Have a lovely afternoon, and I hope you are all staying safe. Mwah.